The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. It is April 10th, 2023, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty across the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest. We have the organization People for Liberty, and that is represented by the 2020 Libertarian Party presidential nominee, Jo Jorgensen, and she's also the chair of the board for People for Liberty. And also sitting in with us too is Andrea Holt, and she is the director of community engagement for People for Liberty as well. But before we get into it, let me introduce you to the rest of our panel as well. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon the Word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And in our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So James, maybe we could get the visual up. So People for Liberty, this is an organization that is trying to, I guess, bring people together to organize, for, liberty-oriented activities and endeavors. So you guys want to tell us a little bit about what it is your organization does?
Thanks, Jason. I would absolutely love to. So a little background on our organization, and Jo can attest to this. When she did run for president in 2020, you weren't able to get out and do much because of COVID. We organized people online through the Let Her Speak campaign to help push Jo Jorgensen as a candidate and get her in the debate. Once that was done, we had a coalition of around 30,000 people who were online and still wanting to fight for liberty, but the elections were over, so what do? Well, that's where the People for Liberty started. So we took those people and then rolled them into a 501c4 where we still do activism, basically around legislation and writing your senators, getting the word out, because I think liberty has been kind of taken and crumpled up and thrown into the trash can a lot of times. The word has a negative connotation many times for many people, when in reality, liberty is just wanting to be able to be yourself without government control. It's pretty simple. So that's what we do, is just basically take that word and help people understand the meaning and what you can do to push that forward. So that's where we began, and that's what People for Liberty is all about. The specifics of People for Liberty is more in the activism and legislation role.
Yeah, and let me mention, when they first did the push, the Let Her Speak campaign, they were a 501c, right? And like the People for Liberty group were not actually even allowed to talk to our campaign. So it was a completely separate campaign, completely independent. And when I went around the country, everybody said, oh, you know what? The campaign we loved the most that you did was the Let Her Speak. And I have to say, that wasn't even our campaign. So it's rather ironic that the campaign that I'm most known for is the one that our campaign did not do, which is why after the campaign, when it came time to continue working for liberty, I joined that group because they did so much on such a small amount of money and with so few people that I figured these guys could really make a difference.
Wow. Well, it struck me two things that you guys said in that intro. And one is that, people having a negative context or concept for liberty out of all this, especially after COVID. I mean, wow, this is just, talk about something that just rings terrible in your ears to hear that. That's just awful. But the other thing too is it's interesting too that if you had been able to get on the debate stage with those guys, I mean, what a different country this might be right now as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and people have asked me, what I thought about the vote fraud and, the suitcase of votes in Georgia and those questions. And it's like, that's small compared to the big problem of people not even knowing that there was another option out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me ask a question to both of you. So, Andrea, you just said about the negative connotation about the word liberty, and I think I will even extend that to the word freedom. Also, seems to be also has negative
Agreed.
connotations attached to it. Why do you believe that is the case?
I think, whether we want to admit it or not, we are a polarized society due to the Democrats and the Republicans. And Republicans have taken the word liberty and used it to their advantage to basically say liberty is what I want it to be. So whenever people who aren't Republicans, which let's face it, the majority of people are independent, and they hear liberty, they automatically think right-wing conservative liberty, when in reality, liberty is for everyone. It's left-wing, it's center, it's right-wing. It doesn't have a wing.
Right. And they took the word freedom too. And I can't tell you how many right-wing radio hosts I heard during the pandemic say, well, we should have the freedom to put whatever we want in our bodies. We shouldn't have to take the vaccine if we don't want to. And yet these are the same Republicans who said, no, you cannot smoke marijuana, even though it's nowhere near as dangerous as the drug of my choice, bourbon. And so you've got this idea that freedom means, okay, we want to say what's okay to put in your body. And no, that's not freedom. Freedom means you don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to cherry pick.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind, most recently as well on this is the whole issue with Twitter, having been used to censor people, largely on the right, it sounds like for the most part. But then TikTok comes around, and suddenly the conservatives, at least a lot of them, want to ban that immediately, which is just that you give government the power to decide which things to cancel and which not to. And that just kind of, it seems like, well, what do you guys stand for? That.
Yeah, Glenn, and I don't know if I'm allowed to mention other people's names here, but Glenn Greenwald gave a great example of that. Yeah, it's like, the very same people who were all let's have transparency and the government shouldn't decide. Oh, all of a sudden now they want the government to decide, and we go right back to liberty and freedom. It's the freedom that they want.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, this brings
and
up.
You do have the freedom to mention names.
Thank you.
We're big Glenn Greenwald fans, so we will always.
I met him at Bitcoin last week, and I told him I was a big fan of his.
Yeah,
okay.
Certainly one of the great journalists of our time as far as speaking out for freedom.
A true journalist.
Yes.
What the meaning of the word journalist is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
This is a real problem, I think, where the so-called journalists have now become activists. They have chosen a side. They are supposed to be, the gatekeepers of truth, and I don't think that is I don't think that's the case any longer. So and I seriously see this as a threat to our liberties in the sense that the amount of misinformation that is being spread because of this role that the mainstream media has taken on. I don't know what you guys think about that, quite frankly.
With the role of mainstream media, I think it's very important that people are educated.
Yes.
And I'm also going to drop a name. I love All Sides. I don't know if you've ever seen that. So they'll tell you they do pretty good at telling which bias what media has. So you can go to their website and you're like, well, this is what the right is saying, this is what the left is saying, and this is what someone more center. Now you can argue whether their rankings are accurate, but if there's ever a topic that I am questioning what the truth is, I usually will go there and I'll read 3 different articles, because somewhere in the middle of all of that, you find the truth.
Yes.
So I think that is very important. But a lot of times I feel that we get so sucked into one news media that we forget that there is a whole different side. And a lot of times, there's always we always kind of say about truth, there's your truth, his truth, and then the truth that kind of is there in the middle. And I think we forget that as Americans, because the right doesn't always tell you the truth. The left doesn't always tell you the truth. And our news media is right and left again. Yeah. So it's just trying to find, it's digging through, for lack of better words, it's digging through the crap to find what's real.
Yeah, it feels like so much media has become advocacy media at this point,
Yes.
and therefore you really need to have that both sides, like in a courtroom, to be able to hear both sides of it. Otherwise, you're just completely lost. And I think Clint Greenwald actually gives us a pretty fair take, on his stuff. But you guys were talking about liberty earlier and what it means and freedom, and how people come to even value liberty is such a I guess it's not the norm, when, especially considering that we have this monopoly of government schools. So it's kind of like the government solutions tend to be like just the norm, what you learn as you grow up. And I was wondering, how did both of you come to discover liberty? Because that's always an interesting path to hear about from people who come on the show.
Well, I would like Joe to tell hers first, because mine segues into that.
Well, luckily, my public school, when I was in 5th grade, asked me to read, as part of the curriculum, Animal Farm. And that really opened up my eyes. And, in fact, so many people asked me, a lot of reporters, oh, so when did you first become interested in politics? And my answer was always, I'm still not interested in politics. In fact, after reading Animal Farm, when I get to high school and I see that we've got, student council and the student body government, and I'm like, well, this isn't fair. And I'm thinking about the pigs playing, poker at the table. It's like, well, how is this fair? So, no, I was, I got my little immunization shot fairly early on.
Yeah.
So,
it's funny. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So Joe solidified it for me in her 2020 run. I became what I would say a liberty-focused person in 2016 due to living in Tennessee and seeing some of the representatives try to push through bills that would directly affect me, although they were trying to oppress the LGBT people in Tennessee. And I'm not LGBT, but because of what they did, it was affecting me. I became an ally because of that, and I was at Gay Pride in Nashville, and I saw a Gary Johnson tent, and I was like, who's this guy? And so that sparked the first little interest that I had. And then I kind of just said, I was an independent from that point on. I just kind of floated around, did my little thing, and then 2020 came along, and I was like, well, these candidates are both horrible. Is there someone else? And I found Joe. So I kind of tell her that she's the reason I'm here, and some days are good and some days are bad, and I blame her for all of them.
And it's funny that you mentioned the LGBTQ, like they pass laws or try to pass laws to do what they want it to do, but then it affects many other people. There have been laws passed in the U.S. Congress, not a state, but U.S. Congress, that would only apply to one company in the entire country. So you've got lobbyists who say, well, we want this particular, let's say freedom. Why is freedom used poorly? Because now you've got a company saying, well, we want the freedom to do this, whereas no other company has that quote unquote freedom. And so you're passing laws that are only going to affect a handful of companies at most. Basically you've got government picking and choosing who the winners and losers are. And not only is that not fair, but it hurts our daily lives, because now instead of companies competing against each other to give us the best quality at the lowest price, now what they're doing is they're competing to buy votes from Congress. So what they're doing is they're trying to please Congress instead of consumers. And it's really frustrating listening to people on the left. And I just want to say, hey, just let me have 5 minutes with you, okay? Because what they say is, oh, big corporations, look how much better the world would be without those evil corporations. Well, those big corporations probably couldn't be that big without big government. In a true capitalistic society, the only way that they get big is by serving the customer.
Yeah. And it's really sad that most people seem to miss that. But, it's almost like, we have just this really hard sales job of convincing people what's right in front of their face. And, Andrea, you mentioned the LGBTQ stuff and the idea that libertarians were out there for equal rights in this area long before the other parties. And yet most people assume the Democrat Party sort of created this, idea of equality for people in this.
Yeah, the libertarians were saying that since the early 1970s. And I always pointed out to young people, did you realize that as recently as 2012, which was, less than 10 years before the election, that both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were against gay marriage. And usually their jaws would drop. Well, why were they against? That doesn't make sense. Why are they against gay marriage? Well, because they're really not for a philosophy or for allowing people to do what they want to do. They're just doing what the focus groups tell them to do to get votes. And so we are the only ones who have been saying, it doesn't matter what the focus groups say or how popular we are. And even if you look at marijuana laws, that wasn't the Democrats pushing that. It was thanks to early inroads from us. And I hate to compare ourselves to the Socialist Party, but I'm sure you've seen the thing where even though the Socialist Party has never been in power, every one of their planks from the 1920s has been put into law. And it's like, if we can get all the libertarian planks into law without being elected, I'm okay with that. I don't care how we get freedom in our lifetime, just so we get it.
Yeah,
and that's a good point. If we step back just to the transgender gender identity issue that we touched on a little bit. I mean, I am in no position to tell an adult what they can or cannot do, but and I don't think the government should be in any position to tell adults what they can or cannot do. My problem with this whole gender identity thing starts when we start trying to transition or try to influence kids into believing that there may be one identity versus another gender identity I'm speaking about. And that is where my problem begins. And I have a real problem when it involves children. I mean, people under the age of 18. And so that is where I draw the line. So I have a real problem with that, yes.
Yeah, and may I speak to that? Because I actually teach the human sexuality class at Clemson. So there are people who are truly transgender, who are born in the wrong body. However, the numbers are about 1 out of 1,000. Unfortunately, though, it's almost become a fad. And one recent survey showed that about 1 out of 200 high school girls identified as the opposite sex. And most of the time they outgrow it. I mean, I hate to say outgrow it because that kind of puts down the people who are truly transgendered, but there's no other way to put it. And so, the research is very clear. It's not politically correct, but the research is very clear that surgery should not be done on anybody before they turn 18, just because, yes, many children do, again, outgrow it.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because the issue here is clearly one with minors that is, I guess giving libertarians maybe a little bit of internal struggle too. But anything with minors is going to be a tough issue for any particular political group, because in the end, we're saying that they don't have the same rights regardless as adults. So these are always going to be struggles about how to figure out some of these things, I guess. So. Yeah.
Well, the issue is, Jason, is that whether is the child itself, the child making the decision, or the parents making decision for the child, we are talking about life-altering things,
sure,
being done to the child and for the child. And when indeed, just as Joe rightfully said, I think the study is that 97% of kids do grow out of gender dysphoria. They grow out of it. I mean, it's science here we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I draw the line at children. Anybody under the age of 18, I think we should not allow that, quite frankly. When they turn 18, they're free to do as they please.
I had a lot of funny ideas going through elementary school and high school.
So did I.
That I outgrew, fortunately.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah.
I didn't. It's pretty boring.
Sometimes I look back on myself and I don't even recognize that guy.
Yeah. We were talking about some of the things that People for Liberty do, as your organization does. One of the biggest pushes for, I guess, as a libertarian is you're literally trying to stop things from happening, because most of the things that are happening are things that are taking away our liberties. I mean, they may be guised as like, oh, look at what the government's going to give you, but it always comes with, essentially taking away something from somebody else or restricting some of your freedoms. Just the TikTok thing is obviously one of those things where, hey, look, we're worried that they're going to do something bad with your speech, so our solution is to take away your avenue for speech here, so you don't have to worry about that. But what are some of the examples of things that People for Liberty are doing right now as far as some of the legislation that you guys are resisting?
So our biggest win recently was actually with the omnibus bill. And, you see the omnibus bill and you just go, oh, how can that be liberty oriented? They're just tossing a bunch of stuff in there. So what People for Liberty decided is, we're not trying to be the premier in any certain thing. We're trying to be the organization that brings great organizations together to work towards liberty. There's so many great people that are doing wonderful things in their own realm. And no one's really tying them together. No one's really saying, hey, Free Thought Project's doing a great thing, or Free the People's doing a great thing, or Freedom Works is doing a great thing. How about if we all build a coalition together to go up against something? So one of the things that we did is we worked with CPAC, Freedom Works, White Coat Waste Project, Free the People, and quite a few others, and got a bill put into the omnibus package that basically helped get the funding for labs like the Wuhan lab and everything. We cut their funding. So things like that. Liberty in bills isn't always we're saying no to bills, because sometimes we're saying yes to bills, and sometimes we're working with other organizations to push those bills. But that got accepted into the omnibus. Whether it got accepted because there were so many pages and you didn't see it, I'll take that as a win, right? So basically, any country that's working against our Constitution or American rights and freedoms, we cut the funding for them. So that's one of the things that we work on so much. And we met you, Jason, at Freedom Fest, and one of the reasons we were there is just building these coalitions. Right now, we're really focusing on the TikTok ban or the Restrict Act. Although that's federal legislation and we do a lot in the state, I think that's one of the most important pieces of legislation we will see in a long time. I liken it to a Patriot Act 2.0. And although you said the right-wing people are wanting to ban TikTok, the Restrict Act is completely bipartisan.
Yeah.
Just right. I mean, almost 50-50 split on that. And they're basically saying that, the countries that go against American interests, we should not have anything to do with their media. And by doing that, they're going to eliminate what you can and cannot use. So they're essentially going to do the exact same things that those states, those countries they're saying are bad are doing to their people. And they're going to be able to jail you if you access TikTok through a VPN. So it is called the TikTok ban, but it's so much more than that, because we all know that once the government gets an inch, they're going to take 5,000 miles, not just a mile.
Oh yes.
Right. And the amazing thing is the same people who are criticizing China and these other countries for not allowing Google. Oh, it's fine for us though to not allow TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just it's kind of surreal. But when I said conservatives, I was mainly trying to make the point that they were recently literally the victims of this, a lot of them, and then they're jumping on board with another idea to do the same thing. So it's just sort of
exactly.
like
Very short memories.
Yeah.
Yes. But all of this comes back to the expansion of central power, though, and this is a problem. I mean, nearly every evil in the world can be traced to central power, whether the concentration of central power, I should say, whether it's here in the United States or in any other country that we think are so god awful. It's always the expansion of central power that ends up causing a lot of the problems we see in the world.
Well, dovetailing right off of that too, what do you guys think is the biggest threat to our liberty, especially after just coming through COVID? I'd never seen such an expansion of federal power, and just on a global level too. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. Well, what do you guys think is the biggest threat today to our liberty?
Government.
In a word.
That's concise.
I must not really be a professor, huh?
Lecture over.
End of story. Period.
Wait a minute, isn't the bell supposed to ring first?
Yeah. Class is supposed to be over now.
Class. Yeah. Teacher says class is over. It's done.
Yes.
Well, we are getting close to the end, and certainly that's the most succinct thing. Hey, if you see government coming, hey, you put a hand on your wallet and run the other way. Probably is the best. But the big thing is what are some of the biggest challenges you guys are facing there? And as we're getting ready to wrap up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us as well?
I mean, I would say the biggest challenge, to spin off of what Joe said, is government. We work in state and federal legislation, and just keeping up with the amount of legislation that's coming through that's going to impede on your liberty we would need hundreds of people full time to do that. And finding enough people to go through what's happening in their states and being aware, and us being able to send out those email blasts and those text blasts and say, hey, check this out. This is what's happening in your state. It's a lot of manpower. It's a lot of man hours. So I'm just going to
which also, by the way, brings up another problem, which is money. So if anybody's you see the website down below, we're welcome for donations to help us in this battle, because we do need, we've got a lot of volunteers, a lot of volunteer hours. However, to run a serious organization like this, you do need a full-time staff, and you do need people around the country to be looking at laws, not only government, federal laws, but also state laws as well, because sometimes those can be almost as onerous, if not more so, than the federal laws.
Well, yes, and we are in California, so we absolutely recognize.
Into the choir. Well, people in California don't have any money left to donate, I guess, but
no, we don't.
Well, here's the website again. It's peopleforliberty.org, and certainly we encourage you all to check it out. We also are going to be interviewing Joe on another episode as well, a little bit about our 2020 run, so you can check that out as well if you want to learn more. But thanks so much for joining us, and until the next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.